He leaned down from the saddle, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him cutting through the Montana cold, and he said it like a man who had never been more certain of anything in his life. Mine. Elena Brooks didn't move. 3 months ago, she'd stepped off a train in this town with $42 and a dead woman's brooch, and a man had handed her back her train ticket like she was something ordered by mistake. She had stood on that platform in front of every soul in Red Hollow, and she had not broken. She wasn't breaking now either, but God help her this time she didn't want to. If that first moment already has your heart, subscribe to this channel right now, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The train had been moving for 3 days. Elena Brooks had counted every hour of it from the moment she climbed aboard in Chicago with $42 tucked inside her boot, her mother's brooch pinned over her heart, and a letter folded so many times the creases had gone soft as cloth. The letter from Thomas Greer, rancher, Red Hollow, Montana. A man she had never met who had written to her in careful, deliberate sentences about land and livestock, and the need for a capable woman who wasn't afraid of hard work. She hadn't expected poetry. She hadn't expected romance. She had expected a fair deal. That was all she'd ever asked of life. A fair deal. The woman sitting across from her in the train car, a heavy-set widow named Mrs. Calloway, traveling to visit her daughter, had looked at Elena's single bag and said with the particular kindness of strangers who mean well, "You're brave, honey. Most women wouldn't do what you're doing." Elena had smiled politely and said nothing. She didn't think of it as brave. She thought of it as necessary. There was nothing left in Chicago. Her mother had died in February. The boarding house where they'd lived for 11 years had raised the rent by the 1st of March. The job she'd had pressing linens at the hotel on Michigan Avenue had been given to a younger girl whose uncle owned the place. Elena had held all of it together for as long as she could, and then there was simply nothing left to hold. The advertisement had been tucked inside the back page of a church gazette. Rancher seeks capable woman for honest partnership. Red Hollow, Montana. Correspondence welcome. She had written the first letter in one sitting. He had written back within 2 weeks. 3 letters later, the arrangement was made. And now, here she was, watching the flat brown emptiness of the Montana plains slide past the window, the sky so wide it made her chest ache, and a feeling she hadn't let herself name curling just underneath her sternum. Not hope. She was too careful for hope. Something quieter than hope. Something that said this could be a beginning. Red Hollow was smaller than she'd imagined. The train slowed into the station just past noon, and Elena pressed her fingers once against her mother's brooch, an old habit like touching wood for luck, and stood up with her bag before the car had fully stopped. She stepped down onto the platform. The sun hit her square in the face. She blinked, adjusted. There were maybe 30 people around, some waiting to board some meeting arrivals. A cluster of men leaning against the station wall with the particular ease of men who had nowhere urgent to be. She scanned the crowd the way you do when you're looking for someone whose face you've never seen, but whose handwriting you know by heart. A man separated from the wall, tall, wide through the shoulders, dark hat pulled low. He walked toward the platform with the slow, deliberate stride of a man used to being the biggest thing in whatever room he entered. Thomas Greer. She knew it before he spoke. The way he moved that particular kind of ownership, like the ground belonged to him, just by virtue of his feet being on it. She lifted her chin, straightened her spine. He stopped, and she watched his face change. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't something she could have misread or explained away later. It was the kind of expression that moves across a face like weather, there one moment reshaping everything in its path. His eyes traveled over her once, twice, settled somewhere around her coat, her bag, the sum total of her. And then he pulled in a slow breath through his nose and looked away. "Miss Brooks," he said. Not a question, an identification, like he was confirming inventory. "Mr. Greer?" She kept her voice level. "It's good to finally—" "You're not what I expected." The words landed flat and public. Several heads turned. Elena felt the back of her neck go hot. Not from shame, not yet, but from the sheer animal shock of it. The way you feel when you step onto ice that isn't as thick as you thought. "I'm not sure I understand," she said carefully. The letters described a woman capable of ranch work. His eyes moved over her again, and this time the assessment in them was bare and entirely unkind. "You're—" He stopped. Started again. "You don't look like what I need." Someone nearby actually laughed. Just one person. A short sound quickly swallowed. Elena heard it like a nail. "I wrote honestly about my experience," she said. "I told you exactly what I knew and what I didn't. What you wrote and what's standing in front of me are two different things." He reached inside his coat, pulled out an envelope, held it toward her. "There's enough there for the return fare. I'm sorry you made the trip." She stared at the envelope. She did not take it. "Mr. Greer?" Her voice had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that takes effort to maintain. "I sold everything I owned to make this trip. I spent 3 days on a train. I gave up—" She stopped herself. Recalibrated. "I came here in good faith, based on an agreement we both made. Agreements can be reconsidered. Not when one party has already paid the cost." He didn't flinch. He just held the envelope out a little farther. "I'm not going to argue about this in public," he said. "Take the money, Miss Brooks. It's the decent thing I can offer you." "The decent thing," she repeated. "Yes." Elena looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she looked at Thomas. Greer. Really looked at him, the way she should have looked at his handwriting more carefully, the way she should have read between his deliberate sentences for what wasn't there. The thing she saw now was simple and complete. This was a man who had measured her from 20 feet away and found her inconvenient. Who had wrapped rejection in an envelope and called it decency. She took the envelope. She opened it. She looked at the money inside, enough for the fare, maybe a little more. She folded it back closed, and she set it down on top of her bag. "Keep it," she said. "I don't take money I didn't earn." She picked up her bag. She walked off the platform. Behind her, the murmuring of Red Hollow started up like a machine, coming back to life after a pause. She made it exactly halfway down the main street before she stopped. Not because she was lost, though she was. Not because she was tired, though she hadn't slept properly in 4 days. She stopped because her legs simply paused, like her body needed one moment to catch up with what had just happened. She stood on the sidewalk in front of a dry goods store, her bag at her feet, and she did the accounting. $42 in her boot. A brooch she would not sell. A return ticket she'd refused on principle and now had no money to replace. No contacts in this town. No room. No plan. The sun was warm on the top of her head. A dog crossed the street at a lazy angle. Somewhere down the block, 2 men were arguing about fence posts. Life in Red Hollow was continuing as though Elena Brooks's entire world had not just folded in on itself. She breathed in, breathed out. "I will not go back to nothing." The thought arrived fully formed with the quiet force of something she'd known for a long time without putting words to it. She had not come 1,100 miles to turn around. She had not packed her mother's brooch and $42 and 3 careful letters to be handed back like a returned package and sent home. She needed work. She needed a roof. She needed 48 hours, that was all. 48 hours to think clearly and find a foothold. She picked up her bag. She walked to the nearest establishment that looked like it might have information, the general store. The woman behind the counter was somewhere in her 60s, with sharp eyes and the economical movements of someone who'd been standing on her feet for 40 years. Her name, Elena would learn, was Mrs. Adler. "You're the mail-order bride Thomas Greer just sent back," Mrs. Adler said, before Elena had even opened her mouth. "News travels fast. Honey in Red Hollow news doesn't travel, it teleports." She set down the tin she'd been restocking and looked at Elena with the direct, unvarnished assessment of a woman who has seen everything and still reserves judgment. "You need something. I need work, and a room, even a small one. I can cook, clean, keep accounts, manage inventory. I'm not particular about the task, but I am particular about fair wages." Mrs. Adler tilted her head slightly. "You're not crying?" "No. Most women would be." "I'll save it for later," Elena said. "Do you know of anything?" The older woman studied her for a moment. Then she leaned forward on the counter. "I don't have work myself, but—" She paused, seeming to consider something. "You should know that what just happened on that platform is going to be the story everyone in this town tells at dinner tonight. Thomas Greer has friends here, owes favors to a few. You may find doors closed before you knock. Then I'll knock louder." Something shifted in Mrs. Adler's expression. Not quite a smile, something more reserved than that, but warmer. "You come back if you need anything. I won't promise work, but I won't shut a door in your face." "That's more than I expected today," Elena said. "Thank you." She walked back out into the street. She'd been to 4 places by the time the afternoon light started going sideways. The hotel had no work. The restaurant across from the train station had work, but no room, and the man who ran it had looked at her the way Thomas Greer had, like she was a problem he hadn't budgeted for. The livery stable owner had seemed interested, right up until someone walked in and murmured something in his ear, and then he'd turned back to Elena with an apologetic shrug that told her Mrs. Adler had been exactly right about which doors were closing. The 4th place was the saloon, and she'd gone in with her eyes open and her intentions clear. She wasn't desperate enough yet to accept whatever came with that territory, but she was close enough to desperate to explore the option. She hadn't had to decide. "We're not hiring," the bartender had said before she'd finished walking in. She was standing outside the saloon reassessing when she heard a voice to her left. "You've been at it for 3 hours." She turned. A man was sitting on a bench against the wall of the building next door, not the saloon, but the feed supply store beside it. He was leaning back with his arms crossed, hat low over his face like a man who'd been sitting there long enough to be part of the architecture. She looked at him. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, lean, sun-weathered, with the particular stillness of a man who doesn't speak unless he has something to say. He hadn't been at the platform when Thomas Greer had handed her the envelope, or if he had, he'd been far enough back that she hadn't noticed him. 3 hours, she said. Counting, not counting, noticing. He sat forward, elbows on his knees. "You've been to the hotel, the restaurant, Ellison's stable, and now the saloon, and you came out of all 4 of them carrying the same bag. Observant. It's a small town. So I've been told." She studied him. "Are you going to tell me something useful, or are you just narrating my afternoon back to me?" He almost smiled, just at the edges. "Wyatt Hale," he said. "I run the Hale Ranch, 6 miles north." She waited. "I need a cook," he said. "I've got 12 men, and the woman who was feeding them left 2 weeks ago to go to her daughter's wedding and didn't come back. I have hands that are hungry and irritable and losing productivity because nobody's managed the kitchen since. I also need someone who can keep accounts. The books have been sitting untouched for a month and I can't afford the mess." Elena said nothing yet. "Room and board," he continued. "Fair wages, $20 a month, which is more than fair, and you're welcome to verify that with anyone in town. 3-month contract. After that, the arrangement gets revisited by mutual agreement or ends clean." He paused. "No other expectations. That part I want to be clear about." "Clear," she said. "You'd be staff. Same as any other hand on the property. I don't require gratitude. I require competence." Elena was quiet for a moment, watching him. The thing she was listening for underneath the words in the pauses was what he wasn't saying. In her experience, men who listed what they weren't expecting from a woman usually had a very specific picture of what they were. But Wyatt Hale was sitting on that bench with his hands loose and his expression uncalculated, and she had learned over 32 years to read the difference between performance and plainness. He was being plain. "I have one condition," she said. "Name it. Don't ever make me feel like I should be grateful for surviving." He looked at her for a moment, really looked the way Thomas Greer hadn't, like he was registering the whole sentence and its weight. "I wouldn't want it any other way," he said. She picked up her bag. "Then let's be clear about the terms," she said. $20 a month, room and board 3 months, and if either party is dissatisfied, we settle it in words and part without ugliness." "Agreed. And I manage the kitchen the way I see fit. I won't be second-guessed over a pot of stew." "I haven't touched that kitchen in 2 weeks," he said, standing. "You can set it on fire if you want, as long as 12 men are eating by sundown." "That," Elena said, "I can manage." Tug. The wagon ride to the Hale Ranch took 40 minutes, and for most of it, neither of them spoke. Elena watched the land open up wider and emptier than anything she'd known in Chicago, and let herself think instead of feel. She was good at that. She had gotten very good at that. The arrangement was temporary. She knew that. $20 a month with room and board was survivable. It was a foothold. It was the 48 hours she'd needed extended into something she could actually work with. 3 months was enough time to learn the geography of this place, enough time to find out whether there was any other option, enough time to decide what a next step looked like. She was not staying. She told herself that clearly in the back of the wagon with the Montana wind cold on her face. She was not staying. But she was not going back to nothing either. Those were the only 2 facts that mattered right now. 12 men, she said, breaking the silence. 12. Wyatt confirmed eyes on the road. "Some of them are decent. A couple are difficult. One of them, Calhoun, will test you the first day, because he tests everyone. Don't let it become a habit. How do you suggest I handle it?" "I don't." He glanced at her sideways. "You said you don't want to be second-guessed. That goes both ways." Elena looked at him. He was watching the road again, completely calm. She turned back to the landscape. For the first time in 4 days, the thing that was not quite hope shifted slightly in her chest. It didn't feel like relief. It didn't feel like safety. It felt like the first inch of solid ground after a very long time of not knowing where the floor was. She pressed her fingers to her mother's brooch and said nothing. They arrived at the Hale Ranch as the sun dropped below the ridgeline, and the first thing Elena noticed was not the buildings or the land or the size of the operation. It was the smell of the kitchen stale and cold, and closed off the smell of a space that had been abandoned mid-function, like a sentence left without a period. She walked in, set her bag down by the door, and stood in the middle of it. Cast iron stove. Cold. Work table with old flour dust still on it. A row of hooks where pots hung, most of them filmed with grease. Pantry to the left. She walked to it and opened the door. Took inventory without writing anything down. Dried beans, salt flour, half a side of bacon, hanging potatoes, 2 wheels of hard cheese, a crate of canned tomatoes. Cornmeal. Enough. More than enough. "When do the men come in?" she called toward the door where she could hear Wyatt's boots on the porch. "Sundown," he called back. 20 minutes, maybe." "Then I need you to start that stove." A pause. "I can do that," he said. He came through the door, crossed to the stove, crouched down. Elena was already at the work table. "You cook?" she asked without looking up. "Badly," he said, "which is why I'm offering you $20 a month." "Fair." She reached for the flour. "When the men come in, Calhoun, the difficult one. What does he look like?" "Big. Red beard. Talks before he thinks." "Good," she said. "Those are the easiest kind." Behind her, she heard the first catch of the fire in the stove, and Elena Brooks rolled up her sleeves, and she got to work. The 12 ranch hands of the Hale spread came in like a weather system, loud-tired, trailing the outdoor air. They stopped when they saw her. She didn't look up from the pot. "Beans and bacon," she said. Cornbread in the oven. It'll be on the table in 10 minutes. Wash your hands before you sit down. Silence. Then a voice, large with an edge of amusement that was also a test. Who are you? She looked up. Red beard, wide through the chest. Elena Brooks. I'm the cook. You're Calhoun. Who told you that? The boss. Sit down, please. I don't know you. You'll know me better after you eat. She held his gaze. Sit down. Something passed through the room, a shift small but real, the way a room shifts when it decides whether to follow someone's lead. Calhoun sat down. Two other men laughed quickly under their breath, and the rest of them, one by one like dominoes choosing the right direction, pulled out chairs. Elena turned back to the stove. In the corner of the kitchen, just past the doorway, Wyatt Hale stood with his arms folded, watching all of it. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Cheed. By the time the plates were empty and the cornbread was gone, and the men were pushing back their chairs with the particular satisfaction of the genuinely fed something in the room had recalibrated, Calhoun on his way out paused near the work table. Not bad, he said, like it cost him something. Thank you, Elena said without inflection. He nodded once and went. When the kitchen cleared, Elena started washing up, and Wyatt came in and picked up a drying cloth without being asked. She glanced at him. You don't have to do that. I know, he said. They washed dishes in silence for a while, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of things that haven't been said yet, and don't need to be. Yet.